Welcome to the course of Urban Planning. In this session today, we are going to look at AMRUT project as an example of special purpose plan within the larger ambit of different levels of plans. Accordingly, the coverage of this session will include, we'll look at the purpose of special purpose plan, we'll look at various urban reforms being taken place in the country. We'll look at AMRUT, look at its objectives, components. We'll look at what kind of cities the mission covers. We'll look at the process of the mission. We'll look at the flow, fund flow, and we'll look at some selective examples. The expected learning outcomes would include you should be able to explain what is the purpose of special purpose plan. You should be able to identify or name some of the urban reforms, and you should be able to review and critically evaluate AMRUT project, its objectives, identify different components, should be able to tell the mission coverage, the process, all the processes about fund flow involved. And then you should also be able to explain some of the examples. As we have already seen earlier, special purpose plan can be prepared for specific development sectors depending on its economic and environmental importance. Depending on the urgency of the need and priority of the sector requiring special treatment and covering special areal extent, special purpose plan for specific subjects can be prepared. However, these plans are to be within the framework of the regional plan, development plan or local area plan in the jurisdiction of the local authority, as we are going on seeing this. These plans may also emerge to serve the purpose of urban planning needs under different central and state government grants. Funding schemes such as AMRUT, earlier which was Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission, abbreviated as JNNRUM, and Hriday Smart Cities, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, National Urban Livelihood Mission, and so on. As in this session, we are looking at AMRUT and its component as an example of special purpose plan within the larger ambit of different levels of plans. Let us briefly understand the difference between JNNRUM and AMRUT. The JNNRUM was launched in 2005 as the first flagship scheme of this ministry. JNNRUM implemented by ministry had two components. For example, basic services for urban poor, abbreviated as BSUP, and Integrated Housing and Slum Development Program, IHSDP, which aimed at integrated development of slums through projects for providing shelter, basic services and other related civic amenities with a view to providing utilities to the urban poor. The mission was initially for a period of 7 years, that was up to March 2012, which was extended up to March 2014 for completion of the already approved projects. During March 2013, the mission period was extended by 1 more year, that is up to March 2015, to complete ongoing projects. 65 mission cities identified based on urban population according to the Census of India 2001 or the cultural and tourism importance were covered under BSUP, and the remaining cities were covered under IHSDP. Nearly 887 cities were covered. Now let us look at AMRUT. The Government of India launched the Atal Mission for Regeneration and Urban Transformation, known as AMRUT, in the year 2015 for a period of 5 years, with the thrust on providing the basic amenities like water supply, sewerage, urban transport, park, with the aim to improve the quality of life for all, especially the poor and the disadvantaged. The purpose of Atal Mission for Regeneration and Urban Transformation is to ensure that every household has access to a tap with the assured supply of water and a sewerage connection. increase the amenity value of cities by developing greenery and well maintained open spaces such as parks, and to reduce pollution by switching to public transportation or constructing facilities for non-motorized transport such as walking and cycling. All these outcomes are valued by citizens, particularly women, and indicators and standards have been prescribed by ministry in the form of service level benchmarks, also abbreviated as SLBs. AMRUT has also been extended for 2 years and most likely to be finished in 2022. The functional difference which come between the two, the JNNRU and AMRUT, we see it because of the experience and learning which we had from JNNRUM. In JNNRUM, it was found that there was no tool available for the state and ULBs to encourage better performance. So, most of the ULBs had no incentive actually. It was the projects were imposed of them and they had no incentive to perform better. So, it was a burden for them. So, whereas in AMRUT, it has now annual incentive provision for states as motivation. The past experience showed that projects got delayed if release of project funds was linked to non-completion of reforms. Therefore, AMRUT shifted from penalizing to incentivization. 10% of the annual budget allocation was kept apart and given to the states or union territories every year as incentive for achievement of reforms. The mission gave incentives for the previous year at the start of the succeeding financial year. The state or the union territories were required to do this through the self-assessment in the prescribed procedure. The National Mission Directorate, on receipt of the self-assessment, announced the award of incentives to the states. We see that the incentive fund was an additionality that was provided by the ministry, and no matching funds were required to be given by the state or the ULBs. The State High Power Steering Committee, also abbreviated as SHPSC, decided the use of the incentive amount. The incentive award was only to be used in mission cities on admissible components of AMRUT, including new projects. The SHPSC would inform the ministry of the use of incentive funds on the projects. The incentive was not allowed to be used as the state share in the project in AMRUT, but could be used by ULBs for their project funding. Unutilized funds for reform incentives would be transferred to project fund every year. The next thing what we see is in JNNRUM, service delivery was not ensured after the completion of the project, whereas in AMRUT, separate fund has been created, or whereas in AMRUT, separate funds have been allocated for operation and maintenance. The state fund, administration and office expenses, was allocated to all states and union territories on the equitable formula. The use of these funds was recommended by the SHPSC and formed as part of the State Annual Action Plan, which is also said as SAAP. This fund was allocated to use for the capacity building programs, comprehensive capacity building program which was funded by World Bank, hiring of professionals and support teams on contract to support the implementation of missions at all levels, taking up activities connected to e-municipality as a service e-mass, displaying the logo or tagline of AMRUT prominently on all the projects, and independent review and monitoring agencies which were also connected with this project, facilitated service delivery at considerable rate in the cities. Further, we see in JNNRUM, no financial burden was given to urban local bodies that resulted in lack of sense of ownership among the municipalities. As we know, there are a lot of challenges among our municipalities regarding the financial health. So, in JNNRUM, no financial burden was given to them. Whereas now in AMRUT, the financial burden is also shared by the urban local bodies. Ministry gave them tool to improve ULBs. So, not only they gave them the burden, but they also gave them the tool to how to improve their financial health, such as they could go for tax and user charges collection. So, the new financial pattern was in the ratio of 50 is to 30 is to 20. So, the center would take the 50% load, state would take 30% load, and the ULBs would take up to 20% of financial burden of any interventions which they do. Further, we saw in JNNRU, the sanctions were made project by the ministry. Ministry used to decide the requirement based on the population, and the project was transferred to the state government, and then the ULBs were to implement the project. So, we see that it was a top-down approach in JNNRUM. Whereas in the AMRUT, it was the reverse process. Now, the ULBs created the project based on their demand, the demand of the users and the priority areas, and would forward to the state and then to the central government. So, we see that the earlier pattern was replaced by approval of the state annual action plan once a year by the ministry, and the state have to give project sanctions and approval at their end, so that it transferred the burden of creating the project, executing the project or designing the project, now transferred from the central to the state government and to the urban local bodies. In this way, AMRUT makes the state equal partner in planning and implementation of projects, thus actualizing the spirit of cooperative federalism. We see that a sound institutional structure is the foundation to make missions successful. Therefore, capacity building and set of reforms have been included in the mission. Reforms will lead to improvement in service delivery, mobilization of resources, and making municipal functioning more transparent and functionaries more accountable, while capacity building will empower municipal functionaries and lead to timely completion of projects. The mission is encouraging and supporting states in conducting reforms that will improve the financial health of the ULBs, delivery of citizen services, transparency, and cut the cost of services. We see following reforms have been targeted through AMRUT. We see that following 11 reforms which are being undertaken. We see e-governance, constitution and professionalization of urban local bodies, augmenting double entry accounting system, urban planning and city level plans, devolution of funds, also reviewing of the building bylaws, setting up of financial intermediaries at state level, municipal tax and fees improvements, credit rating, energy and water, Swachh Bharat mission. Further, we see that the mission has 7 components. The first component is water supply, where government targeted to provide water supply system, augment existing water supply, provide water treatment plants and universal metering. In this component, government also tried to undertake the rehabilitation of the old water supply system and treatment plants. The government also looked into the regeneration of water bodies and recharging of the groundwater. The government also made provision for special water supply arrangement for difficult areas, hill and coastal cities, and those having water quality problems such as arsenic or fluoride. The next component of the mission we see is the sewerage and septage management. In this component, the government targeted to provide these decentralized networked underground sewerage systems, including augmentation of existing sewerage systems and sewerage treatment plants. Further, the government targeted to rehabilitate the old sewerage system and the treatment plants in this component. Moreover, the government also made provision for recycling of water for beneficial purpose and reuse of waste water. The third component is the storm water drainage in the mission. In this component, the government made provision for construction and improvement of drains and storm water drains in order to reduce and eliminate flooding in the cities. The fourth component is urban transport in the mission. In this component, the government targeted to construct and improve the footpaths, walkways, sidewalks, footover bridges and facilities for non-motorized transport such as bicycles, and also provide multi-level parking in our cities. The fifth component in the mission is green space and parks. In this component, the government plans to develop the green spaces and parks with special provision for children, senior citizens and Divyang friendly components in our cities. The sixth component is reforms implementation, the reforms which we saw. In this component, the government intended to improve the delivery of citizen services, bringing down the cost of delivery, improving the financial health, augmenting resources, and enhancing transparency in managing affairs of our cities. The seventh component is the capacity building. In this component, the government targeted to improve the institutional outcomes by individual capacity building and institutional capacity building. It intended to enhance the functional knowledge, improve the job related skills and change the attitude of municipal functionaries in our cities. The universal coverage of water supply and sewerage services have first charge in the mission, like we have seen all the components. So, the universal coverage of water supply and sewerage services had the most weightage in the program. We see maximum allocation of 2.5% of project cost for development of parks with children and elderly friendly features. Now we look at the guidelines which have been developed by the government for the addressing the mission objectives, the statements and the guidelines. Ministry in its mission statement and guidelines document published in 2015 gave clear framework for its execution. We see that the allocation of fund, the total outlay for AMRUT was 50,000 crore for 5 years from financial year 2015-16 to financial year 19-20, and the mission was operated as a centrally sponsored scheme. The AMRUT has continued, has been extended for further 2 more years and for the purpose of evaluation based on the evaluation done by the ministry and incorporating learnings in the mission. The mission fund consists of the 4 parts. First is the project fund, which constitute 80% of the annual budgetary allocation. Second, we see incentives for reforms. 10% of the annually budgetary allocation is done for reforms. Further, we see state, as we had already seen, the administration and office expenses have been included. So, state fund for administration and office expenses were 8% of annual budgetary allocation. We see that administrative and office expenses also has component of and it has 2% of annual budgetary allocation. Looking at the working component of the project fund, the project fund was divided among states or the union territories at the beginning of each year. An equitable formula was used to distribute the annual budgetary allocation, in which equal 50-50 weightage was given to the urban population of each state or united territory as per the census of 2011 and the number of statutory towns in the state or union territories. It also had provision to take into account the number of statutory towns, changes which might happen during the mission period in states or the union territories every year. The central assistance for the project was given in 3 installments of 20, 40, 40 of the approved cost. Now, looking at the mission coverage, we see that mission covered 500 cities. The category of the cities covered in AMRUT were: first, we see all cities and towns with a population of over 1 lakh with notified municipalities, including cantonment board. We see all capital cities and towns of states if it is not included in 1 lakh cutoff. All cities, towns classified as heritage cities by ministry under the Hriday scheme. 13 cities and towns on the stem of main rivers with a population above 75,000 and less than 1 lakh if they are not included in number 1. 10 cities from hill states, island and tourist destination with a limitation of 1 from each state. So, that was about the coverage of AMRUT mission. Now, we will look at the process flow of AMRUT. We will see how projects get created. We are looking at the process flow here. The Apex committee at the ministry level allocates the annual budget to the states according to their resources available. Accordingly, the state level high powered steering committee SHPSC, chaired by the state chief secretary, which steers the mission program in its entirety, asks for the ULBs to prepare service level improvement plans, which is called SLIP, which is the building block of this AMRUT, SLIPS, to provide water supply and sewerage to all in the city. Then the state aggregates the SLIPs and prepares the State Annual Action Plan, SAP. State then sends SAP back to the Apex committee for approval. Revisions are sought if required and the SAP is approved. The state accordingly informs the ULB about their SLIP approval and the execution of the project starts, and ULBs get the detailed project reports for their projects. For the state high level powered steering committee, the technical appraisals are done by the state level technical committee are the SLTC are the state level technical committee. According to the number of projects and the scale of the projects, the SLTC approves the funds according to the total annual budget of the state. According to the fund, the ULBs will execute the project and float tenders and so on. There is a review team which reviews the progress of the project and recommends for incentive. So, we see how the process is reverse and comes from the user. The services are also checked through the service level benchmark. Here we see this entire AMRUT mission, how it is helping us if we reconnect with the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, where we try to bring, come and create different levels of governance, and we see how we really give the local governance in the hand of the local people. So, we see how these slips are created by the users and then it has been aggregated at the state level, and the Apex body is just approving it and giving the resources for the purpose, part resources for the purpose. Now, we will look at the example of Kerala State Annual Action Plan. In Kerala, 9 cities have been identified from the state for funding under AMRUT. The list includes 6 municipal corporations and 3 municipalities, targeting a population of around 34 lakhs, which is 22% of the total urban population for direct benefit. We see here in the document, we are walking through the document, we see that the SAP creates in its initial document, it creates profile of the mission cities, like we can see Thiruvananthapuram, it gives complete profile of the city here, and it gives what is the status of water supply, what is the status of sewerage system, and all these details are given, number of wards and what is the growth trend there. Likewise, we see it for the Kollam city and all those cities which have been selected for the purpose. Further, we see that the State Annual Action Plan is prepared and following questions are being listed. So, when they are really understanding, reviewing the need of the place, so they follow certain process. So, these questions they answer: has the state government diagnosed service level gaps? Has the state planned for and financed capital expenditure? Has the state moved towards achievement of universal coverage in water supply and sewerage septage, as this is the major thrust of this mission? What is expected level of financial support from the central government, and how well state ULBs and other sources of finance been identified and assessed? Like we had seen that state and ULBs also have share the financial burden. So, this particular aspect ensured that those resources have been identified so the projects could be completed on time. We also see the questions like how fairly and equitably have the needs of ULBs been given due consideration. So, how different sector and how geographical areas have been seen in the among the ULBs. Further, we see another important component, have the adequate consultation with all stakeholders have been done. So, as we see that this is a reverse process which we are following, we are coming from the bottom up approach. So, it also ensures that how the consultation of the different stakeholders have been done. So, we see that how the citizens, local MPs and other public representatives have been engaged in the process. Once they identify this, then they also adopt a principle of prioritization, where they look at how which places, which projects, which sectors have to be prioritized in which city. So, accordingly they follow the principles of prioritization. Now, we look at their SAP document, where we see that they have identified water supply projects in 2015-16. Here are all the names of the cities are given, and then they look at the service level. So, their service level was where the target has to be like 100%. So, we see that they identify 83, 85, what is the household coverage of water supply connection. So, we see it that status was 83, and 85, 44 we see here, and Guruvar we see like as low as 9%. So, per capita quantum of water supplied in LPCD, so what their current levels are and what they are targeting for. And so, accordingly the project cost has been worked out, and these details have been decided, and you can see the priority number of the project. So, we see that here we see Thiruvananthapuram gets the first priority with the 18% coverage, and Guruvayur gets 9th priority, and so on. So, we see those how the priorities have been worked out. Here we see that in the document how sewerage and septic management has been planned out, what quantum they are looking at. Likewise, we see here the overall funding which has been decided for them, breakup of total MUD allocation in AMRUT for Kerala. We see that the total project is 104 crores, including these two values, 95.99, which is allocation which they get it from the central share, plus 8% of what they get for administration and operation cost, 8%. So, including this, the total cost they would get total funding which Kerala would get is 104 crores, and we see how they are distributing this, how much will be the central share and how much will be the state share, and then what will be the total AMRUT size which we see here. So, that is how the calculations are done. We further see how sector wise, earlier you saw city wise, now you can see sector wise, water supply, sewerage, drainage, urban transportation, green spaces, how each sector, what the center would contribute, what the state would contribute, and what the ULBs would contribute to the total amount here. And further we see how financial year wise the distribution would happen as per the sector, and what center will take the load and state would take and ULBs would take. Here we see how they are working on the service level benchmarks. So, the water supply, what kind of indicators they are going to use, how they are going to evaluate their performance, how they are achieving it. So, for example, if we see one here, household level coverage of direct water supply connections. So, the baseline is 63, and by year 2020 they want to target it to 100, and how every year they are going to reach to that number. So, we see that how they are planning for all these projects, and how city wise all these water supply sewerage projects. So, Thiruvananthapuram gets 18 projects, Kollam gets 6 projects and 2 projects and so on, and then the total cost is worked out. Here again we see how much would be invested in each of the area for each in each city. For water supply, how much would be invested, and sewerage and drainage, urban transport and green spaces and park. Here again we see state level plan for achieving service level benchmark. So, we see how with each place how they are going to continue to address to their service level, what targets they are attaining. Here we see that for each sector how they are creating project. For Thiruvananthapuram, you can see the project name, construction of new water treatment plant and so on, and what will be the cost of the project. So, likewise you see it is been broken down. So, you see how the urban local body, state and the center works in collaboration to bring all these services to the people and what people need. Other reforms, at what urban reforms we had looked at, we can see what Kerala has implemented: e-governance, digital digital ULBs, creation of ULB website. So, the target for them was to do it in 6 months. They achieved it. Publication of e-newsletter, Digital India. So, they had the target of 6 months, which is initiated and so on. So, further we see constitution and professionalization of municipal cadre, policy for engagement of interns in ULBs and implementation. So, they have been able to do it. Augmentation of double entry, yes, partially accomplished. You can see all these how they have worked out in their SAP, urban planning and city development plans. So, they you can see all these slips, they have been prepared, slip and SAP has been prepared. They have prepared make action plan to progressively increase green cover. So, how they have initiated all these things, and then the devolution of funds and functions, how the funds have to be mobilized, and the review of building bylaws. So, they have accomplished that. Their target was for 12 months. We see what they have done: municipal tax and fees improvement. They have partially accomplished their targets. We see improvements in levy and collection of user charges. So, they had a target of 12 months to be complete with prescribed timelines. So, they are positive about it. Energy and water audit. So, they are estimating it to finish it within the timeline. So, we see these pictures how some of the projects have come up in Thiruvananthapuram, the projects which they have done. So, this for the example. We further see that how they have reviewed their work completion, the timeline they have targeted. So, we see those all those reform, what implementation they are doing and how they are achieving their targets here. So, these are those. Now, we will look at the example of slip, and that is from Raebareli, Uttar Pradesh. So, we see this is the example of service level plan SL slip which we see here. So, how they have provided and how they have given the present status of all these services, what benchmark they have and what kind of service they are looking at. So, with regards to water supply, with regards to metering connections and non-revenue water and so on. So, further we see how they have also worked out water tap connection and how they have worked out the need of their area. So, we see that how all these cities and states and center is working together to bring these things happen. So, we see while concluding, we see that what is the implementation status of the reform under AMRUT. We see that in many of the cities, credit rating and municipal bond credit rating work has been done for 485 cities. It's been awarded and completed in 468 cities. Out of 468 cities, 163 cities have received investable grade rating IGR, including 36 cities with the rating of A minus and above. Energy audit of water pumps, we see that field survey for energy audit has been completed in 413 cities, and energy audit has been completed in 358 cities with 11,100 water pumps have been identified for replacement with energy efficient pumps. We see replacement of street lights with LED lights have been done. Nearly 62 lakh street lights have been replaced with LED lights out of the target of 97 lakh light. This is estimated to save nearly 137 crore units of energy as per year and reduce 11 lakh tons of CO2 emission per year. So, you look how we are achieving these targets within the special purpose plan. Online building permissions OBPS has been made operational in 1,705 cities across the country, including 439 AMRUT cities. Capacity building surpassing the targets of 45,000 functionaries, 52,000 functionaries and elected representatives across the countries have been trained so far. So, when we summarize, we see that what kind of special purpose plans are these, and they are aligned with the mission. So, today we saw AMRUT, and through that how these special purpose plans are being linked with the vision, how they are linked with the state level plans, and then how at the urban local level plans and different projects are being formulated. So, we had looked into the purpose of special purpose plan, various urban reforms and the details of AMRUTs, and we also looked at some of the examples. These are the references which have been used. Our coverage was limited with the scope to make you aware of the topic. There are enormous readings and movies available to explore. Few are suggested here. This is not an extensive list. You may feel free to suggest more from your experience. Please feel free to ask questions. Let us know about your concerns you have. Do share your opinion, experiences, and suggestions. Looking forward to interacting and co-learning with you while exploring cities and urban planning. Thank you.